بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
This concept of bay'at of the Imam, irrespective of who is the Imam, is it the 12th Imam of the Shias or the Khalifa of the Sunnis, doesn't matter. But this concept of the bay'at of the Imam is a universal concept among the Shias and the Sunnis alike. Among the Shias, I would just like to present you one of the earliest hadiths that we have, and this goes to the compilation of al-Kafi done by Sheikh Kulaini during the Ghaybat al-Sughra era. And he worked 20 years to compile that book known as al-Kafi. Kulaini himself died in the year 329 of the Hijrah. In the second volume of the common, not the new edition, but the earlier editions which were more common during our time, there is a section there he talks about Kitab al-Iman wal-Kufr, and under that there is a subsection of Da'aim al-Islam. What are the pillars of Islam? And there Sheikh Kulaini, through his chain of narrators, and I don't want to go through the names and confuse you more here, he goes all the way to Isa bin as-Sarri, who is quoting, he was there in the presence of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. He says, I was in the presence of the sixth Imam and I asked him, can you describe to me what are the da'aim al-Islam, the pillars of Islam? لا يسع أحدا التقصير عن معرفة شيء منها. He says, can you describe me those fundamental issues as far as the foundation of faith are concerned, where nobody can be ignorant of that. You must know about it. Otherwise, your religion will become corrupt and Allah will not accept your amal. So he explains it in a elaborate manner. Imam responds to him by saying, as far as the da'aim al-Islam, the pillars of Islam are concerned, number one, shahadat an la ilaha illallah. Tawheed is the main thing. There is no God but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wal-iman bi anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. You can't have Islam without Muhammad. I'll submit to Allah only. No, if you want to become a Muslim, you will have to accept the Prophet. وَالْإِقْرَارِ بِمَا جَاءَ بِهِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. And you will have to confess and accept what He has brought from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us. وَحَقٌّ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ الزَّكَاةِ. And He says, you have to give from your wealth the charity in different forms. وَالْوِلَايَةِ الَّتِي أَمَرَ اللَّهُ وِلَايَةِ آلِ مُحَمَّدٍ. And then Imam ends with this wilayat, which Allah has made it obligatory on us, and that is the wilayat of the Ahlul Bayt. So then Isa, the narrator here, says, follow-up question. هل في الولاية شيء دون شيء فضل يعرف لمن أخذ به? Are there some parts of the, how do you explain this importance of wilayat, where we should adhere to it? And Imam responds to that by reciting this ayat from Surah Nisa, ayat 56, where he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, Ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul wa ulul amri minkum. Obey Allah and obey the Rasul and those who are in authority among you. This is where he's coming to the wilayat. Ulul amri minkum refers to those who have the authority in the place of Rasulullah. And then he says, then he relates it to this issue of ulul amr. وَقَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. The sixth Imam is saying that the Prophet of Allah, the Messenger of Allah said, مَنْ مَاتَ وَلَمْ يَعْرِفْ إِمَامَهُ مَاتَ مِيتَةً جَاهِلِيَّةً. If a person dies and doesn't know his Imam, doesn't acknowledge his Imam, then his death will be death of Jahiliyyah, which means it is Kufr. Pre-Islamic era is known as Jahiliyyah. And this is where then, Imam says that here it is Rasulullah, the first, in this category of this hadith. And after Rasul is Ali. And after Ali, who comes? He says, some say Muawiyah, but we say Ali. And then Hassan, then Hussein. But then he says there are others who would say Yazid. And then Hussein ibn Ali. And he says you cannot compare. They are not on the same level when you talk about Ali and Muawiyah, for example, or Hussein and Yazid. And then Imam was silent for a few moments until somebody else in the audience says, Imam, can you elaborate more? And so then he says, after Hussein, Ali ibn Hussein, then Muhammad bin Ali, Aba Ja'far. And then he describes the contribution of the fifth Imam. And then he goes on and he says, وَالْعَرْضُ لَا تَكُونُ إِلَّا بِإِمَامٍ. The earth will not be without an Imam ever until the world comes to the end. وَمَنْ مَاتَ لَا يَعْرِفْ إِمَامَهُ. And whoever dies and doesn't know his Imam, again he is repeating this. مَاتَ مِيتَةً جَاهِلِيَّةً. His death will be the death of Jahiliyyah and Kufr. And then he says, you will know the need of this aqidah that you have when the time of death comes. Then you will realize what is the benefit in believing in the Imam of the time. When we talked about Bay'at 2 years ago, this was the statement. مَنْ مَاتَ وَلَمْ يَعْرِفْ إِمَامَ زَمَانِهِ. Whoever dies and doesn't know the Imam of his time, his maut and death would be the death of Kufr, Jahiliyyah. And this is where, and I basically went through the hadith quoted by the Sunni authorities. So this is one hadith that we have from the sixth Imam in Usul Kafi. This same narration, Sheikh Kulaini has also. He says, the same narration I have from another chain of narrators. So basically he heard this story from a set of, group of people who narrated to him all the way going to Isa, the actual narrator there with the Imam. And he says, I also heard this from another group of people, Abu Ali al-Ash'ari, Muhammad bin Abdul Jabbar, who heard it from Safwan, who heard it from Isa. And so we have two sanad, two chain of narrators for this hadith quoted by Sheikh Kulaini in Al-Kafi. Another example of this statement that, if you die and you don't know the Imam, you don't have the ma'rifat, your death would be the death of Kufr. This is from a scholar of the same era of Kulaini, same time. Ali bin Muhammad al-Khazzaz al-Razi. He has a book called Kifayatul Athar fi an-Nass al-A'immat al-Isna Ashar. There, through his own chain of narrators, he describes the event which is quoted now. He says, Abu Hamam heard from Muhammad bin Uthman al-Amri. Muhammad bin Uthman al-Amri is one of the 4 naibs of the Imam in the Ghaibat al-Sughra. And he is narrating this during the days of the 11th Imam. He says that I heard my father asking a question to the 11th Imam, and I was there, he says. He says, my father asked him. So this is now Sayid al-Umri asking the 11th Imam. He says, I would like to ask you about the narration that we hear from your forefathers. And what is the narration? He wants to verify this. He says the narration is أن الأرض لا تخلو من حجة الله على خلقه إلى يوم القيامة. The earth will never be devoid of the hujjat of Allah, a representative of Allah, a proof of Allah till the day of Qiyamah. وَأَنَّ مَنْ مَاتَ وَلَمْ يَعْرِفْ إِمَامَ زَمَانِهِ مَاتَ مِيتَةً جَاهِلِيَّةً. And that if somebody dies and doesn't know his Imam, while he had the ability to know him and pledge allegiance to him and express the support to him, then his death will be the death of Kufr and Jahiliyyah. 11th Imam, when he heard that, he says, إِنَّ هَذَا حَقٌّ كَمَا أَنَّ النَّهَارَ حَقٌّ. It was a daytime. He says, this statement that you are quoting from my forefathers, this is the truth, just as the daylight that you see. Nobody will deny that now it is day when this conversation was taking place. So he was saying, as now it is daylight, similarly this hadith is haqq and the truth. And so somebody asked him, we know you as the Imam, 11th Imam. Ya ibn Rasulullah, فَمَنِ الْهُجَّةِ وَالْإِمَامِ بَعْدَكَ. Who will be the hujjat of Allah and the Imam after you? And this is where Imam says, Ibn Muhammad, my son Muhammad, وَهُوَ الْإِمَامُ وَالْحُجَّةُ بَعْدِي. He will be the Imam and hujjat after me. مَنْ مَاتَ وَلَمْ يَعْرِفُهُ مَاتَ مِيتَةً جَاهِلِيَّةً. Whoever dies and doesn't know him, his death will be death of Jahiliyyah. And then he says, what will be the state of people when he goes into ghaybat? So he's talking about ghaybat also. And this is where we come to realize that you have at least one hadith quoted by two different sanads by Sheikh Kulaini from the 6th Imam, and this one hadith by Khazzaz in his book Kifayatul Athar. And both this sanad, all three sanads here, are authentic and correct. Others, people like Sheikh Saduq, have actually, I am not mentioning his because his narration actually is based on the narration of the book Kifayatul Athar. So this is the Shia perspective, and there is no doubt about it, as the 11th Imam made it very clear, that this hadith, من مات ولم يعرف إمام زمانه مات ميتة جاهلية, it is as true as the daylight that you see now.